All right, ladies and gentlemen, so now that we're done with our 3 quotes that support our summary, we're on to the last part of Literacy Standard 8.1. Remember earlier I told you there were 2 parts. The first one was we had to make an analysis, and we had to back it up with citations, right? So, the last part was we had to make an inference, okay? And what did we have to do with that? We had to go ahead and back it up with evidence. We had to cite something in order to make sure that we understood what we were inferring, right? Now remember, an inference is something that you get out of the story that you think the story is telling you. So I'm going to ask you all a question, and I wrote it up here on the board while everybody was still writing up on the projector. And the question is this: why did they take Gene's dad? And when I say they, remember we're talking about the FBI. If we look back at our summary, we said in the last sentence that the FBI comes to take Gene's dad away. Why did they take Gene's dad away? This is the part where we're going to go ahead and infer how we know, okay? And infer what we know. So, I'm going to help you out with this. We're going to say they took Gene's dad because they thought he was communicating with enemy ships. Now, this kind of seems weird. Like, why would they pick out this one person to think that he was communicating with enemy ships? Well, if we look back at page 7, the very first thing we're going to go ahead and see at the very top is the part that says, and in the early days of the war, the FBI was picking up all such men for fear they were somehow making contact with enemy ships off the coast. Now, this may seem a little weird to us because we go, wait a minute, that started off with the word and. Now, remember I told you, we never start a sentence with the word and. Well, if we look a little closer, the very last sentence of page 6 says, he was not only an alien, he held a commercial fishing license. And in the early days of the war, the FBI was picking up all such men for fear they were somehow making contact with enemy ships off the coast. So they picked him up because he was a fisherman. And they figured, well, if you're out fishing, you have a radio. Remember we talked about that the other day when we were talking about some of the instruments that you find on a ship? One of those things is a radio. And they figured if they're out in the middle of the sea, they may be close enough to some other ships to be able to talk. So, an inference, ladies and gentlemen, is something that we pick up on that the book is telling us. So, our statement, they took Gene's dad because they thought he was communicating with enemy ships off the coast, is backed up with that sentence. Now, here's what I want you to do. We're going to do the same thing we did with our summary evidence, and we're going to go ahead and write down our quote, right? Okay, perfect. So, follow along with me on the board, and you're going to see, except I didn't give you that little bubble, so now we're going to have to kind of write everything by hand now. So I'm going to start off by writing page 7, so this way I know where my quote comes from. We're going to go ahead and write evidence, and then we're going to take that last long sentence, okay? So, he was not only an alien, he held a commercial fishing license. And in the early days of the war, the FBI was picking up all such men for fear they were somehow making contact with enemy ships off the coast. Now, I know this one was kind of long, and I know I told you earlier that that was the longest one you were going to have to do. This one's just a little bit longer. But I was being honest because that was the longest one you had to do for the summary. This one has to do with the inference, so it's its own by itself. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We did our worksheet together, and it's going to look something like this. As you can see, sometimes it's a little neater when you look at the stuff that's on the book. Obviously, my writing's not the best, but it gets us through, right? I got to make you guys laugh a little bit because if I don't, well, then you guys just kind of sit there and stare at me. Now that we're done with this, tomorrow you know what I expect from you when we walk in at the beginning of the period, right? Okay, so tomorrow we are reading chapter 2 for homework tonight, and tomorrow when we come into class, there's going to be another worksheet that looks exactly like this, and we're going to work on that together in the first 20 minutes, okay? The first 15 minutes, everybody's going to go ahead and work on it. Those last 5 minutes, we're going to review everything the same way we did today. All right? All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and move on over. And thank you very much for helping me out with Literacy Lesson 8.1.